My daughter set her phone face down on the table at Christmas dinner, and I almost missed it. She did it casually, the way you'd set down a glass or adjust a napkin. But I saw it, and something in my chest went cold. I picked up my fork and kept eating. Her boyfriend was talking about his investment portfolio. He'd been talking about it for most of the meal, actually. How he'd found this opportunity that most people never get access to. How his mentor had personally vouched for it. How the returns were the kind of thing that made your accountant call you twice to confirm the numbers. He was charming about it. Energetic. The kind of person who fills a room without seeming to try. My daughter was nodding along, smiling at him the way she used to smile at me when I came home from a long shift and brought her a gas station candy bar like I'd handed her something precious. I kept my eyes on my plate. The phone face down on the table, that was our signal. We made it up 11 years ago when she was 19 and I was going through my divorce. It was a hard year. Her mother and I had been together for 22 years, and the end of it wasn't clean or quiet. My daughter was caught in the middle in ways I didn't fully understand until later, when she told me about nights she'd sit in her college dorm room, not knowing who to call, not wanting to make either of us feel worse. She'd started coming home on weekends more than she needed to. I think she was worried about me. I was probably not doing a great job of pretending to be fine. One Saturday afternoon, we were sitting at this same table, the same kitchen before I redid the floors, and she was trying to tell me something about her roommate. Something that had been bothering her for weeks. I could tell she was choosing her words carefully, working up to the real point. Then my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I answered it without thinking. It was a 20-minute call about refinancing my mortgage. By the time I hung up, the moment was gone. She was washing her dish at the sink, back to me, and whatever she'd been trying to say stayed unsaid. She didn't bring it up again for 2 weeks, and when she finally did, she cried telling it. I cried too, if I'm being honest. Not about the roommate situation, which had resolved itself by then. About the fact that she hadn't felt like she could just say, "Dad, I need you to listen right now." So we made a rule. Simple. If one of us puts our phone face down on the table and doesn't touch it for the rest of the meal, that means I need to talk to you. Actually talk. Before you leave tonight. No explanations required. No context. Just the signal, and then we'd find a way to be alone. We'd used it maybe 6 or 7 times over the years. Once when she lost her job. Once when I had a health scare I didn't know how to bring up. Once when she was thinking about leaving a relationship and didn't want her mother's opinion, only mine. It was ours. Small and quiet and entirely ours. And she had just used it. His name was Brandon. He and my daughter had been together for about 7 months. I'd met him twice before that Christmas. Once at her apartment in October, once at a birthday dinner for her friend that I'd been invited to last minute. Both times he'd been likable. Remember details from previous conversations. Asked about my knee surgery. Seemed genuinely interested in her life. The kind of person who makes you feel a little suspicious of yourself for not trusting him. He was in his late 30s, maybe 40. Said he worked in financial consulting, which was vague enough that I hadn't pressed it. He dressed well. Had an easy laugh. My daughter, who is 30 years old and has good instincts about people, seemed happy in a way that looked real. So I'd let myself relax. That was my mistake. We got through dessert. My daughter had made a pecan pie, my favorite, and she served Brandon first, which she never did with anyone. I filed that away. He helped clear the table without being asked, which I noted too, though differently than I would have 20 minutes earlier. He went to use the bathroom. I started filling the sink to wash the dishes, even though I have a perfectly good dishwasher, because I needed something to do with my hands. My daughter came and stood next to me. She picked up a dish towel. She said quietly, "I don't know where to start." I said, "Start anywhere." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Brandon wants me to move some money." I kept washing the dish in my hand. "How much?" "All of it." She paused. "My savings, my 401k, everything in the Roth." The water ran. I turned off the faucet. I said, "Tell me about it." She told me it had started in October, after I'd met him the first time actually, which made me feel strangely implicated, like my presence had somehow given something permission to begin. He'd mentioned an opportunity to her, something his mentor had introduced him to, a private investment fund called Crestline Wealth Partners. He'd described it as a kind of exclusive vehicle that wasn't available through traditional brokers, the kind of thing that required a personal referral and a minimum buy-in. The returns, he said, were structured differently than what she was used to seeing in a standard brokerage account. She'd been skeptical at first. She said that to me twice, like she needed me to know she hadn't been naive. I didn't say anything because that wasn't the point. By November, she was curious enough to ask more questions. He had answers for everything. He showed her a website, professional design, clean layout, a phone number that went to a real person when she called, someone who knew her name before she said it. He showed her a PDF of quarterly performance reports going back 4 years. He introduced her, over video call, to 2 other investors who spoke about their returns with quiet confidence, like people who didn't need to convince anyone of anything because the results spoke for themselves. She said, "It felt real. It felt like something that people with money do, that I just didn't know about." I asked, "Has he put any of his own money in?" She hesitated. "He says he's already in it. He says he's been in it for 2 years. Has he shown you his account statements?" He showed me a summary. "A summary he printed, or a summary you logged into somewhere and saw yourself?" She looked at the dish towel in her hands. "He printed it." I nodded. I didn't say anything yet. "How long has he been talking about you moving the money?" I asked. "Seriously?" "About a month. But he brought it up for the first time maybe 2 weeks after he first mentioned Crestline." She paused. "He said the window was closing, that the fund was reaching its maximum capacity and his mentor could only hold my spot for so long." "And how do you feel about the timeline?" She looked at me then. Really looked at me. That's why I put the phone down. I dried my hands on the other dish towel. I leaned back against the counter. She said, "I don't want to be wrong about him." "I know. He's been really good to me, Dad. He's kind. He listens. He makes me feel like I matter to him." "I believe you," I said. "And I want to tell you something, and I want you to hear it the way I mean it, not the way it might sound." She nodded. "None of that changes what you just described to me." She looked at her hands. "Someone who loves you," I said, "doesn't create urgency around your retirement savings. They just don't. It doesn't matter how real the opportunity is. It doesn't matter how much he cares about you. If the first response to your hesitation is that the window is closing, that's not care, that's pressure. Those are 2 different things." The bathroom door opened down the hall. We both heard it. She said quickly, "What do I do?" I said, "Nothing tonight. Tonight you just let dinner be dinner." Brandon came back to the kitchen. He offered to help finish the dishes. I told him we were almost done and handed him a glass of eggnog instead. He took it gratefully. We talked about the football game that was going to be on later, and he had opinions about it that seemed genuine. And for a while, the kitchen felt warm and normal, and it was easy to forget what had just happened between me and my daughter over the sink. I'm good at that. 31 years working as an electrician will teach you to finish the job in front of you even when something else is on your mind. We watched the second half of the game. Brandon fell asleep on the couch sometime around the 3rd quarter, which my daughter pointed to with a small, exhausted smile that broke my heart a little. After he went to bed, she had a guest room, and I noticed she wasn't going in with him. She and I sat at the kitchen table with decaf coffee, and I asked her to walk me through everything from the beginning. Every detail. Every conversation. Dates if she could remember them. She talked for an hour. Crestline Wealth Partners, I will tell you right now, does not exist. I know because I spent the next 2 days looking. I'm not a financial expert. I'm not an attorney. But I know how to be methodical, and I know what questions to ask, and I know, because I'd been scammed before, 20 years ago, in a different way, in a way I've never told my daughter about. I know what it feels like when the ground beneath something isn't solid. I started with the SEC's EDGAR database. I typed in Crestline Wealth Partners. Nothing. I searched FinRay's broker check for the name of the mentor Brandon had mentioned, a man named Hartwell, who Brandon said had been in wealth management for 30 years. FinRay had records for 17 people with that last name. None of them matched the description Brandon had given. I called the phone number from the Crestline website. A man answered, professional and warm, asked how he could help. I asked him to spell the full registered name of the fund for me. He did. I asked him for the fund's CIK number, the identifier the SEC assigns to every registered investment fund. He put me on hold. He came back and said their compliance team would need to send that in an email. I gave him an email address I don't use for anything important. I never heard from them. The website, when I ran it through a domain registration lookup, had been created 11 months ago. The PDF performance reports my daughter had been shown used a font that didn't exist before 2021 but included charts dated 2019. Small thing. The kind of thing you'd only notice if you were looking for it or if you'd seen it before. I called my daughter on day 2. I didn't lead with the conclusions. I asked her if Brandon had ever shown her documentation that she could take home and keep, physical copies or files she'd downloaded herself. She said he'd always reviewed things with her in person or on the video calls with the other investors. I asked her if she knew the names of those other investors. She had first names only, Marcus and Diane. I asked if she'd ever tried to find them independently, not through a link Brandon sent, but on her own. She hadn't. I need you to do one thing, I said. Just one. Ask Brandon to give you the full legal name of the fund, the SEC registration number, and the name of the custodian bank where your money would actually be held. Tell him you want to look it over before you make any decisions. Don't mention me. Just say you want to do your due diligence. She called me back 4 hours later. He had told her that institutional investors didn't go through EDGAR, that the fund operated under a different regulatory framework, and that requiring this kind of documentation was a sign that she didn't trust him. He said, I thought we were past that. I want to tell you what that phrase did to me when my daughter repeated it. I thought we were past that. I've been doing this long enough, being a person in the world long enough to know that line. I've heard it in different forms. I can't believe you're asking me that. After everything I've done for you, if you loved me, you wouldn't need proof. The content changes. The shape is always the same. It's designed to make you feel like your reasonable question is an act of aggression. Like your skepticism is a character flaw. It is one of the oldest moves there is. I told my daughter, you haven't done anything wrong. You asked a normal question. Anyone, any legitimate investment professional would expect that question and welcome it. The fact that his response was to make you feel guilty tells you everything you need to know. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I think I already knew. I know, I said. That's why you put the phone down. She broke up with him 4 days after Christmas. She didn't do it over text because that's not who she is. She called him on the phone and he was not gracious about it. He told her she was making a mistake. He told her the window had already started closing. He told her that in 6 months she would look back on this moment and understand what she'd lost. She told me about the call after the fact because she'd wanted to do it herself. I was proud of her for that too. She didn't lose any money, not a dollar, because she put her phone face down on the table and we did the dishes together. I've thought a lot since then about why it worked. Why that particular moment, that particular signal, cut through everything. I think it's because the signal wasn't about the boyfriend. It wasn't about the investment scheme. It wasn't even really about the money. It was about the 11 years of small moments that made the signal mean something, all the Saturday afternoons and long drives and phone calls where we'd learned how to actually talk to each other, not past each other. She didn't come to me because she thought I had the right answers. She came to me because she trusted that I would hear her before I judged her. And I think that's what people who love each other have to build over and over in the ordinary moments, so that when the extraordinary moments come, The door is already open. I'm not telling you this because I think I handled it perfectly. I made mistakes. I was too slow to see things in October that I maybe should have seen. I have a tendency to want to believe the best of people my daughter brings into her life because I want her to be happy, and sometimes that wanting makes me a little blind. But I'm grateful she'd taught me the signal, and I'm grateful I was paying attention when she used it. If you have kids, if you have anyone you love who might be too embarrassed or too confused or too deep in something to just come out and say, "I need help," build that door. It doesn't have to be a coffee mug or a phone on a table. It can be anything. A word, a gesture, a question you've agreed to ask. Just make sure they know it exists. Make sure they know you'll answer it. And when you're sitting across from someone at dinner and something small and quiet happens that your gut tells you means everything, put your fork down. Pay attention. The moment might be passing faster than you think. One more thing, because I've gotten questions like this before and I want to be direct about it. If someone in your life is asking you to move retirement savings, your 401k, your IRA, your Roth, anything, into an investment they introduced you to, before you move a single dollar, do these things. Search the fund's name in the SEC's EDGAR database at sec.gov. Search the advisor's name in FINRA's broker check at finra.org. Ask for the name of the custodian bank or brokerage where the assets will actually be held. Ask for documentation you can take home, read yourself, and verify independently. If any of those requests are met with pressure, guilt, or urgency, stop. The window closing is not your problem. Your financial security is your problem. Legitimate opportunities will still be there after you've done your homework. Scams are the ones that can't survive a second look. My daughter still has every dollar she's ever saved. She's doing fine. She went back to work after the holidays, and she's been putting a little extra into her Roth every month, which she told me about on the phone last week like it was no big deal. I told her I was proud of her. She said, "I learned from the best." I didn't argue. But between you and me, the credit goes to her. It always has. I'd been turning this over in my head for months now. The way you turn a stone over in your hand without quite knowing why you can't put it down. What strikes me most isn't the scam. Scams exist. They've always existed, and they'll keep existing as long as there are people willing to dress up a lie in the right clothes and speak it with enough confidence. What strikes me is the chain of small choices, hers and mine, that made the difference between losing everything and losing nothing. My daughter made a signal with me 11 years ago because she once tried to say something important and the moment slipped away before she could. That was the cause. A small, quiet hurt that could have stayed small and quiet, except that we decided to do something about it instead of letting it calcify into the kind of distance that grows between people so slowly they don't notice until it's wide enough to get lost in. That was the first link. She built something with me when she didn't have to, when she was 19 and had every reason to just figure things out on her own. She chose to stay connected. In over 11 years, she kept making that choice, and I kept making it back, until the connection between us was strong enough to carry real weight when real weight arrived. The second link. She paid attention to her own discomfort. She felt something was wrong with Brandon's urgency, and she didn't talk herself out of it. That is harder than it sounds. When you care about someone, when they've been kind to you and patient and present in the ways that matter, your mind will work very hard to find reasons to dismiss what your gut is telling you. She didn't fully dismiss it. She held it. She carried it to Christmas dinner and she set her phone face down and she trusted that I would hear her. That's not a small thing. That is the kind of emotional honesty that most people spend their whole lives trying to learn. The third link. I asked questions instead of delivering verdicts. I didn't tell her Brandon was a fraud the moment she said his name. I asked how long, how much, what she'd seen, how she felt about the timeline. I let her arrive at the shape of the thing herself, with me beside her rather than dragging her there, because I've learned, slowly, and not without mistakes, that people protect what they've already decided to believe. The only way through that is to ask the right questions and let them hear their own answers. She heard hers. Every piece of this was built in ordinary time, not in a crisis. The signal came from a Saturday afternoon over bad coffee. The trust came from years of phone calls and drives and conversations that seemed small when we were having them. The questions I knew to ask came from a mistake I made 20 years ago that I've never stopped learning from. That's what I want people to take from this. Not a checklist, not a warning about Crestline or investment fraud. Though those things matter, the deeper thing is this: what you build in the quiet times is what holds when things stop being quiet. Intertree doesn't show up on the day you need it fully formed. It accumulates. It compounds. Every time you tell the truth when a half-truth would have been easier. Every time you stay in a hard conversation instead of changing the subject. Every time you choose to actually listen instead of waiting to respond. My daughter didn't lose her savings because she'd spent 11 years building the kind of relationship where she could lay a phone face down on a table and know someone would notice. That's the whole story. The rest is just details.